My brother's rehearsal dinner was the kind of night that makes you believe everything is finally falling into place. The venue was a converted farmhouse outside Asheville, North Carolina, string lights over a long wooden table, mason jars filled with wildflowers, the smell of wood smoke drifting through the open barn doors. My brother Daniel had spent 3 years saving for this wedding. He was 31, steady, the kind of man who still called our mother every Sunday. His fiancée, Renata, had a laugh that filled every room she walked into. I liked her immediately when he introduced us 2 years ago. I told him so then. I meant it. I was 30, unmarried, working as a paralegal in Charlotte. I drove up that Friday afternoon with my overnight bag in the back seat and a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a real occasion. The drive took 3.5 hours. I sang the whole way. Daniel met me in the gravel parking lot. He hugged me longer than usual. I remember thinking he seemed tired but attributed it to nerves. Wedding nerves. Normal nerves. He squeezed my shoulder and said, "I'm really glad you're here." I told him there was nowhere else I'd be. The dinner went beautifully. Renata's family had driven in from Savannah, her mother, 2 aunts, a younger sister named Priya who was 7 months pregnant and glowing. Our side was smaller. Me, Daniel, our uncle Raymond, and our father's older sister, Aunt Carol, who had flown in from Phoenix. Our parents passed within 18 months of each other 4 years ago. It was the kind of loss that makes family feel both more precious and more fragile at the same time. I sat beside Aunt Carol during the toasts. She was 72, sharp-tongued in the way that used to make me flinch as a child, but which I had come to understand as her version of love. She squeezed my hand when Uncle Raymond gave his toast and cried through the whole thing without apologizing for it. I thought about my mother. I thought about how proud she would have been. After dinner, people drifted toward the fire pit. Someone brought out a guitar. Renata's aunt told a story about teaching Renata to cook that made everyone laugh so hard, Priya had to press both hands to her stomach. I stepped away to use the restroom and checked my phone out of habit. There was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "You need to leave the property tonight. Don't say anything to Daniel. I'll explain everything tomorrow. Please trust me. This matters." I stood in the narrow hallway outside the restroom for a long moment, reading the message 3 times. The music drifted through the barn walls. Someone laughed. I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came in under a minute. "Renata's sister." The other one. "Not Priya. Please, just leave." I didn't know Renata had another sister. In 2 years of dinners and holidays and 1 long weekend in Savannah, no one had ever mentioned another sister. I walked back toward the fire pit slowly, scanning faces. Renata was leaning against Daniel's shoulder, watching the fire. She looked peaceful. She looked happy. I stepped away from the group and called the number. She answered on the second ring. Her name was Simone. She was 35, Renata's half-sister from their father's first marriage. She said she wasn't invited to the wedding. She said that was not an accident. Her voice was controlled, but her breathing was fast, the way someone sounds when they've been holding something in for a long time and the seam is finally splitting. She told me she had been trying to reach Daniel directly for 6 weeks, that her messages had been blocked, that she had driven 4 hours to Asheville that evening and was parked on the road outside the venue because she couldn't get past the gate. I asked her what she was trying to tell him. She said, "The house your parents left, do you know what's in the will?" I felt the hair on my arms stand up. Our parents had left a modest estate, the house in Greensboro where Daniel and I grew up, a small investment account, and a life insurance policy. Daniel and I were named co-beneficiaries in equal shares. We had both signed the paperwork with the estate attorney 18 months after our mother passed. I had a copy in a folder at home. Simone said, "A new will was filed in Guilford County 7 months ago. Daniel is listed as sole beneficiary. Your name is not on it." I said nothing. She said, "Renata's mother is a notary. The attorney who filed it is her first cousin. I found out because I know someone who works in that office. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." I walked further from the fire pit, past the line of parked cars, until the music was just a low hum behind me. The night air was cold. I hadn't brought a jacket. I asked her why she hadn't called me sooner. She said she wasn't sure I would believe her. She said she wasn't sure she would believe herself if she hadn't seen the documents. She said she had copies. She could email them to me right now, if I gave her my address. I gave it to her. I stood in the cold parking lot and watched the PDF load on my phone. It was 11 pages, my parents' names at the top. The date of filing 8 months after my mother's funeral, 5 months before Daniel's engagement announcement. I scrolled to the signature page. My mother's signature looked right. My father's looked slightly off, a tremor in the loop of the last letter that I had never seen in 30 years of birthday cards and permission slips and notes tucked into my childhood lunches. My father had Parkinson's in his final year. His hands shook badly. But this signature didn't shake. It was smooth. It was clean. I forwarded the PDF to my personal email. Then I forwarded it to my work email. Then I screenshotted every page individually and saved them to 2 separate folders on my phone. I had spent 6 years as a paralegal. I knew what document preservation looked like. I started doing it before I had fully processed what I was looking at. I called Simone back. I asked her if she had the original filing receipt. She did. I asked if she had the name of the notary and the attorney of record. She read them to me. I typed them into my notes app. I asked her if she was willing to speak with an attorney. She said she had already spoken with one. She said she was willing to do whatever was necessary. I told her to stay where she was. I told her I would come to her. I walked back to the fire pit. Daniel was laughing at something Uncle Raymond had said. Renata's hand was on his arm. I watched her face for a moment, the careful smile, the way her eyes moved around the group just a half second before her expression settled. I had always read that as social awareness. I was reading it differently now. I told Daniel I had a headache and was going to head back to the inn early. I hugged him. He hugged me back and said, "Feel better, big day tomorrow." I told him I loved him. He said it back the way you do when you're happy and tired and surrounded by people and don't know that anything is wrong. I walked to my car. I drove to the road outside the venue. Simone was parked in a gray sedan, her hazards off, a lamp-lit phone screen, the only light inside the car. She was younger looking than I expected. Dark hair pulled back, wearing a fleece jacket, a thick folder on the passenger seat beside her. She looked like someone who had not slept well in weeks. We sat in her car for 2 hours. She told me everything. The family had a history she had only pieced together over time. Renata's mother, Beverly, had managed the finances for her own parents' estate years ago. A cousin had contested the accounting. The case settled quietly, but the cousin stopped speaking to the family entirely afterward. Simone didn't know all the details. She knew the shape of it. She told me Renata had asked Daniel, early in their relationship, detailed questions about the estate. She knew this because Daniel had mentioned it to Simone in a brief period when they were in contact before Renata asked him to limit outside family relationships for the health of the relationship. I asked Simone when she and Daniel had lost contact. She said 14 months ago. 14 months ago, Daniel had been happy. He'd called me every week. He had slowly, over the following months, become harder to reach. I had attributed it to the relationship deepening, to the natural way couples turn inward. I had not wanted to be the difficult sister. I had not wanted to interfere. I thought about all the times I had talked myself out of saying something. Before I left Simone's car, I photographed every document in her folder. I gave her my direct number and my attorney's number, a woman I trusted from the firm where I'd worked for 3 years. I told Simone not to contact Daniel yet. I told her I needed 48 hours. I drove to the inn. I did not sleep. The next morning, I called my attorney at 7 a.m. Her name was Patricia. She had handled probate cases for 20 years. She called me back at 7:38. I read her everything I had. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "Where are you right now?" I told her Asheville. She said, "Don't attend the wedding today." I sat with that for a moment. She said, "I need you to hear me clearly. If you attend that ceremony today, you may inadvertently complicate certain legal steps we need to take. I know that's not what you want to hear, but this needs to be handled correctly if it's going to hold." I asked her what I needed to do. She told me. I wrote it down. I called Daniel at 9 a.m. He didn't answer. I texted him. "I need to talk to you before the ceremony. It's important. Please call me." He called back at 9:22. He sounded confused and slightly irritated. The way you sound when someone creates friction on a day you've spent a year planning. I told him I needed him to come to the inn. Alone. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Is everything okay?" I said, "I need to show you something. Please come." He came. He sat across from me at the small table in my room. He was already in his dress shirt, collar open, jacket over his arm. He looked like my brother. He looked like every version of my brother I had ever known, the 12-year-old who used to leave snacks outside my bedroom door when I was upset, The 20-year-old who drove 4 hours to help me move my first apartment. The man who called every Sunday even after everything fell apart. I placed the printed documents on the table between us. I watched his face as he read. He went through several expressions in the space of about 90 seconds. Confusion, dismissal, the beginning of argument. Then something slower and heavier moving in behind his eyes. He said, "This can't be right." I told him the filing date. I told him the notary's name. I told him I had already spoken to an attorney. He picked up one page, then another. He set them down carefully, the way you handle something when you are afraid of what it means. He said, "Renata wouldn't." I didn't say anything. He said it again, quieter. "She wouldn't." I told him I wasn't asking him to make any decisions right now. I told him I was asking him to take 24 hours, postpone the ceremony, illness, logistics, anything. Give us time to have the documents formally reviewed. He sat for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "How long have you known?" I told him since last night. He looked at the window. His jaw was tight. He said, "She asked me about the will, early on. I thought she was being practical. She said she wanted to understand my financial situation before things got serious." He paused. That felt mature to me. I told him it was designed to feel that way. He called the venue. He told them there was a family emergency and asked whether a postponement was possible. They said yes. He called Renata. I left the room to give him privacy. I stood in the hallway for 14 minutes. I counted them. When he opened the door, he was holding his phone loosely at his side. He said, "She hung up." He said Beverly had called him back 30 seconds later, screaming. He said he could hear Renata in the background. He said they did not deny it. What Beverly said instead, when she ran out of anger, was, "You were going to let your sister take half of what your parents left you. We were protecting you." He sat back down on the edge of the bed. He said, "They actually believe that." I sat down beside him. Patricia filed the formal contest with the Guilford County Probate Court the following Tuesday. The signature discrepancy was documented by a forensic handwriting specialist within the week. The signature on the contested will lacked the fine motor tremor consistent with the late-stage Parkinson's documented in our premises' father's medical records at the time of the purported signing. Beverly's cousin, the filing attorney, surrendered his bar certification before the case reached full hearing. The notary's license was referred for review. Renata did not attend any of the proceedings. Her attorney submitted responses on her behalf. The filings described her role as peripheral. The judge reviewed the evidence and used a different word. The original will, the one Daniel and I had both signed with the estate attorney, was reinstated in full. Daniel took a week off work and drove to the coast by himself. He texted me from somewhere near Wilmington, a photo of the water, no caption. I texted back a single heart. He called me that Sunday, the way he always had. We talked for 2 hours. He told me he kept returning to the moment I knocked on his door that morning. He said part of him, when he first saw the documents, wanted to tell me I was wrong, that I was jealous, or overreacting, or doing what he had been quietly warned I might do. He said he recognized the thought the moment it appeared, recognized it as something that had been placed there carefully over many months, and chose not to follow it. I asked him what made him choose that. He said, "You drove 3.5 hours to sit at a table with people you barely knew, just because I asked you to. You had no reason to do that except that you wanted to be there for me." He paused. "That's not something a person does if they're the threat." Simone flew in from Atlanta 3 months later. Daniel picked her up from the airport. I met them at a restaurant downtown, a corner table, afternoon light coming through the window, the kind of ordinary Tuesday that becomes the thing you remember later. She and Daniel had a lot of years to cover. They started from the beginning. I ordered coffee and let them talk. The house in Greensboro is still in the family. Daniel hasn't decided what to do with it yet. Sometimes I think he's not ready. Sometimes I think that's exactly right, that some things don't need to be resolved quickly, that sitting with something for a while is not the same as avoiding it. I drove past it once, a few months ago, on a trip back through town. The oak tree in the front yard still has the rope mark where our father hung a tire swing when I was 6. The porch light was off. The curtains were drawn. I sat out front for a few minutes. Then I drove home.